Hello everyone and welcome to this latest webinar for the Guild of One Name Studies. So I'm just going to run through a few of the initial slides as usual. So if you're not a member of the Guild, welcome. And if this is your first attendee at one of our webinars, then welcome to you too especially. So you can find out about the Guild at our website, which is one-name.org. Okay, so finding your way around the screen. So hopefully you can hear and see us, or you can't see us, but we certainly can't see you, of course. But if you can't hear properly, please do check that you've got your headphones on and the volume's up and all those things, just in case it is an easy fix problem. We will be watching the question and answer. So if you do have a problem, you can put a little note in the question box, and this is being recorded. So questions. So there is a box on the right hand side for questions, and you can go in there and just pop a little note in and I'll pick it up, and I will keep an eye on that throughout the presentation this evening. Handouts. There is a handout. It will be available from Jeanette's website at the end of the session. The very last slide will have the link to where the handout is, and the link to where it will be is also going to be on the Guild website as soon as I've got the recording sorted, which will hopefully be sometime this weekend. So if you want to keep up with where we are in terms of our events calendar for webinars for the rest of this year, you're able to do so. You can go to the website, go to the events tab, and you'll see under there webinars. Or it's much easier to do is to go to events/webinars-2022. I'm in the process of finalising the next 3 or 4 sessions, but the next one is going to be 17th of August, and is going to be a look at the Featherstone study with Paul Featherstone. So I'm going to hand you across in just a minute to Jeanette Rosenberg, and Jeanette is a professional genealogist and a member of AGRA. She holds a postgraduate diploma in genealogical studies from Strathclyde University. Is popular and knowledgeable around Jewish and a general genealogical speaker in the UK and beyond. Jeanette is very well known in Jewish genealogical circles, and you can read all about Jeanette on the website, and a link to her site, which is, I can't quite see it for the moment, but it has an unusual name, I know. Just can't find my notes. Here we go, roundtoitgenealogy.wordpress.com. But I've been told the link to that site is on the last slide. So I'm just going to work the technological magic and get this across to Jeanette, so then she can begin talking through how we can use geological resources for our one name studies.
Hi everybody, I'm Jeanette. I'm hopeful that you can see my slides now. So I'm going to be talking, yeah?
Yeah, it looks fine.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, that's good. I'm going to be talking about researching in Jewish genealogy sources for your one name study. As Julie very kindly said, all of the resources that I'm going to mention today, all of the URLs to the different websites and sites where you can see or find how to access the books that I'm referring to, everything is in the handout, and I will be publishing the handout on my blog. It's called Round to It Genealogy blog, because that's when I get round to publishing the handouts. Anyway, and if you fancy a good route through my website, you might find lots of other handouts from lots of other talks too. First, a bit of information about the Jewish Genealogical Society of Great Britain. We are a one-stop shop for Jewish genealogy here in the UK. We are, I suppose, a focal point for people researching Jewish genealogy in the UK. So those of us who are here, but not all of us who are here, as you will discover when learning about Jewish genealogy sources, are actually researching family from here. So we're about those in the UK researching Jewish genealogy wherever it happens to be, and people who had family who came to or through the UK, perhaps who aren't here, as well as those who are here. You can find out about JGSGB on our JGSGB website. We've also got a very vibrant, busy Facebook group, so encourage you to join that as well. We encourage, promote people to study, research Jewish genealogy sources. We are now co-located with the Jewish Museum in London at Camden Town. So that's where our library has relocated to. We used to be in the same place as the Society of Genealogists, but they've moved, we've moved. Anyway, we are now at the Jewish Museum. What else to tell you? We have our journal and our books. So if you find you've got pockets of people in different places around the world, you may find that we have some resources that will be of use to you in our library. We, like the Guild, have a varied program of events, activities, guest speakers. We do visits, can translate, Hebrew gravestones, can tell you about all sorts of specific to Jewish genealogy documents. I'll be going through quite a lot of those. And just like everybody else, we've been online during COVID. We're starting to go hybrid again now, though. We have a website called JCR UK, Jewish Communities and Records UK. That's the UK one-stop shop, and it's got a page for every current and former Jewish community in the UK. So that's all parts of the UK, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, also the Channel Islands, the Isle of Man, and Gibraltar. Now, you might already be saying, why is Gibraltar there? It's not in the UK. And the answer is, we include Gibraltar because there are very, very close links between the Gibraltarian Jewish community and that of the Sephardi community in London. Now, Sephardi, there's a term for you. We'll be covering what the difference between Sephardi and Ashkenazi are later on. So I'll leave that one hanging there just for a moment. JCR UK is a joint venture that we have with Jewish Gen. We'll be looking at Jewish Gen in more detail. And we have all sorts of resources online. And to get into JCR UK, you need to register on Jewish Gen. Registration on Jewish Gen is free. And then you can access JCR UK's resources and databases from there. Now, you never get to see this page online. This is an expanded page that shows you all of the different sections in JCR UK. And as you mouse over what we call the lozenges on the site, you get to all of these different sections. Again, I'll be talking through some of our crown jewels, perhaps I'll call them in a moment. Our databases have all different components, starting quite obviously with birth, marriage and death records and censuses, but also some other more specific or specialist information, some school registers for Jewish schools, synagogue seat holder lists, some Jewish surnames in insurance policies. That's the Sun Insurance records at the London Metropolitan Archive, but also police records, traders' records, and general locality databases. So you can explore those through JCR UK. One of our best crown jewels is the 1851 Anglo-Jewry database. That's got about, I think it's about 93% of the Anglo-Jewish community who were in the UK at the time of the 1851 census. All of the records in the database are sourced, so you'll be able to replicate what you find there and source it for your own use. If you're looking for Jewish records prior to civil registration, two sites to recommend to you are Synagogue Scribes and Cemetery Scribes. Don't forget, all of these links are going to be in your handout, so no need to sit scribbling, taking down notes. You will find them when you get the handout. Let's talk about marriage certificates for a moment, because here's where Jewish genealogy sources look different perhaps to others. So we have the law, marriage according to the rites and ceremonies of the Jewish religion, and you can see that a marriage certificate tells you that. And as on this certificate, and as we found fairly frequently in earlier certificates, the bride and groom were registered as living at the same place, because obviously it was cheaper to register a marriage both living at the same place. And when you see on a certificate where people were not fully literate, instead of signing names with a cross, Jewish people wouldn't want to sign the mark of the cross because that's not a Jewish thing to do. So you can probably tell that the person signing this one was Jewish. She wasn't literate, but she made the mark of a circle rather than a cross. So that can often be a giveaway of somebody on a civil marriage certificate not being a Christian or potentially being Jewish. Bit of a giveaway that it's signed by the chief rabbi, but we won't go into details of that right now. Let's go straight away to look at a particular specific to being Jewish document, and that is a Jewish marriage authorization. To get married according to the rites and ceremonies of the Jewish religion, you have to have permission from the synagogue authorities, and we have a database that we can access of those. The database itself is on the United Synagogue website, and the marriage authorizations cover 1880 to 1922. Every year there is a further year of records that gets added to be able to be searched. To find out about marriage authorizations, read up on the JGSGB website. And if you want to order a marriage authorization document, and they look like this particular item, if you're a JGSGB member, you get a £5 discount on the cost, and you can order and pay online. So a marriage authorization tends to be written with names in Hebrew, and where they can be useful is they might say where the people originated, as in outside the UK before they came to the UK. It will also potentially have listed the names of the groom's unmarried brothers, because it used to be, according to law, that if the groom died, one of his brothers could later marry the bride. Anyway, more about that a bit later. So those come from the United Synagogue. We have lots of different kinds of synagogue, but the United Synagogue has all the early marriage authorizations, and they make them available to search online. They also have how to search for burials in United Synagogue cemeteries, and there's a search interface on their website, and they're doing their very best to put photos up of all of the graves. And if you come across a grave where the gravestone inscription isn't legible, if you drop them a quick email, they tend to send one of the ground staff out to photo the stone, and they'll put the new one up very quickly. Leastways, that's my experience. Let's talk a bit now about Jewish Gen. Jewish Gen is designed to be the one-stop shop for worldwide Jewish genealogy. It's has a very tiny staff of about 4 or 5. It's actually physically located at the southern end of Manhattan Island, and it's predominantly designed for the average American Jewish genealogist or somebody based in America researching their Jewish ancestors. And we talk about lozenges on this slide as well. The green lozenge shapes on the top of the page, and again, if you put your mouse on them on the website, the pull down menu comes up with all of these items. You can't see all of these online spread out quite like this. this gives you a clue of lots of the things on the Jewish Gen website. Big section dedicated to first timers and things to do for new genealogists. Important is the Star of David symbol. That's the one set on its own in blue and green on here, because when that appears on different parts of the website, if you hold your mouse over it, that can take you to other parts of the site. I tend to tell people, don't print everything Jewish Gen tells you. If you go into the frequently asked questions page, that covers 16 pages of A4 at the current count, and just the index to the Jewish Gen information files covers 7 pages. So lots of information on Jewish Gen, and use it as your online Jewish genealogy encyclopedia. One of the best things on Jewish Gen, and it's fairly new, it's only a couple of years old, is the unified search page. And you need to be registered for Jewish Gen. I've mentioned that's free to register. If you offer them a donation of at least $100, you get additional search criteria will open up to you, up to 4 different layers, but it works with exactly the same data if you don't. Unified search will search the entire Jewish Gen website and come up with every mention of a name that is within the website. So it's pretty impressive. And there's lots of different elements that you can search. So this is an example of the search screen with the 4 search parameters open. So you can search on surname, given name, town, by country, and then Soundex. We need to talk about Soundex because Jewish genealogy, well, if your family were using Yiddish, that would have traditionally been written using Hebrew characters which don't have vowels. So Soundex is the sounds like, and Jewish Gen has got an exactly or a sounds like or very similar, and then it goes on to fuzzy searches. Definitely worth having a play around, because if you don't use things like that in Jewish genealogy, you may be missing out. You might miss quite a lot of hits in the database. Again, Jewish Gen has got a complete list of databases by country, but also by other topics. The Holocaust database is absolutely massive. Obviously, lots of Jewish families impacted by the Holocaust from no matter where in the world people were. Loads of different component databases, 190 different sub-databases, part of the Jewish Gen Holocaust database. And when talking about the Holocaust, think also about looking on the Yad Vashem database, the Central Names database. Yad Vashem is the UK, is Israel's Holocaust Memorial Museum, and one of the things that you can search is for pages of testimony. So there's an example of one of those on the right-hand side. And pages of testimony can be written in all sorts of different languages. They were written by people who'd survived the Holocaust, who were commemorating those who they know perished in the Holocaust. Another place to look for victims of the Holocaust is in the Arolsen archive. This at a place in Germany called Bad Arolsen, which used to be a concentration camp in the war. After the war, it became the place where all the Holocaust records, all the records that the Nazis had for all the different concentration camps, were taken to Bad Arolsen, and it became initially the International Tracing Service of the Red Cross. Several years ago, the Red Cross withdrew from running that archive because the tracing service is perhaps wasn't needed the same way as it was to search and reunite families after the war. So it became the Arolsen archive, and they've got lots and lots of documents online. But this is an archive that was created out of boxes and cartons and mile upon mile of shelves of data. And they've started off by taking photographs of each of the items. And then after that, there are lots of people working on crowdsourcing projects to add metadata to make those documents searchable. So it's a website that I suggest if you're looking, you keep going back to, because there's new information being added. Now, the Wiener Holocaust Library is the UK's Holocaust Library, and it's based not far from Euston Station in central London. It's an academic institution, and they host the UK's electronic copy of the Arolsen archive. And the first donation of data was about 17, I think it was about 15.5 terabytes of data. So you can search the Arolsen archive from home, or you can go to the Wiener Library and search there with the help of their trained multilingual researchers, because not everything is yet searchable because it doesn't have metadata, and they know how to search the database in all the different languages that these records were created in. So if you find you're researching Holocaust victims for your one name study, that is the place I would advise going to. We have a number of reference volumes that are useful when searching destroyed communities. From a Ruined Garden is specifically all about Polish Jewish communities that were destroyed in the Holocaust. And Where Once We Walked is does what it says on the tin. There is an entry in Where Once We Walked for every former or destroyed Jewish community. And these, like quite a lot of other reference volumes for Jewish genealogy, can be found in JGSGB's library. You can purchase copies from an organization called Avatenu. We'll be talking more about them in a little while. And you can, I believe, see copies in the library of the Society of Genealogists when it's available. Now, most Eastern European Jews, so the Ashkenazi community, came from an area that they might have called Russia or Poland or Russia. And basically that was an area called the Pale of Settlement. And that's the area in the middle section on this map. It is a territory where 80% of the Russian Jewish community had to live. It was a deprived area. It was a very poor area. There were lots of pogroms in this area, and many of the Jews there were persecuted and often chose to leave if they could. Now, when you're looking at issues with Eastern European Jewish genealogy, you have to bear in mind a number of key issues. Maps and borders will have changed. The Pale of Settlement covers a number of different countries. The population's moved. Don't stick to looking just at English language sources, because you'll miss out. The data will be organized differently, where we might look for a file or a folder. There's all sorts of different classifications called fonds and opus, and each country will be organized slightly differently. Languages will be different. There's a whole load of different documents you're going to have as well. You might have a metrical or a community register. Pinkas HaKehilot is a community register of those communities often that perished or were destroyed in the Holocaust. A Moel book, that is the book of records belonging to the man who did the circumcisions for the boys, the baby boys, Jewish boys. You might have a revision list. That might be the register of people living in a particular area for local taxes. And again, that gives you the names, the ages, the places of people. You might have passports, police records, all sorts of different things. So don't just look for birth, marriage and death records, although clearly they are available for lots of places too. If you want to learn more about Jewish immigration to the UK, the now archived Moving Here site from the UK's National Archives gives a really good description and a timeline. I like this one, even though it's now archived, but you can still access it. So there were Jewish communities in the UK. It's said we came with the Norman conquest or shortly thereafter. The Jews were expelled from the UK in 1290. There were some Jews clearly that were resident throughout this time, including the Ferdinando family. They're a one-name study. They've got a guild study. Officially, the Jews were readmitted by Cromwell in 1656. Key date for us, we'll look at the Jewish Chronicle in just a moment, and lots of other dates as well, important in researching Jewish families in the UK. Incoming immigrants to the UK would often stay at the Poor Jews Temporary Shelter. So there's a database, it's hosted from South Africa. Clearly, why wouldn't a London database be hosted in South Africa? There we go. There's quite a high degree of completion of UK censuses, whilst being recorded in a census in Eastern Europe would be quite a scary thing to happen, because it could lead to your sons being taken away to serve in the Tsar's army. The Jewish community in the UK worked closely with the Census Authority and published leaders and information in the Jewish Chronicle before the censuses from 1891 onwards, and you'll see encouragement to complete the census form and an explanation of it in Yiddish. So the biggest problem is that enumerators weren't used to listening to those Eastern European sounding surnames, so it'll be hard to find people because they wrote down what they thought they heard, and what they thought they heard and what the last name really was could be quite different. But there we go. We'll look at that a bit later too. So the Jewish Chronicle has an online archive. It's been going since 1841, published every week. And you can subscribe and get access to the online archive. There's all sorts of birth, marriage and death information in there. Yes, that is me, and that was my birth announcement. Some of the earlier death records, I should say, in the JC can help with family reconstitution. So you can see in the death records, it says, the top one says African papers, please copy. That was because Barney Isaacs had family living in South Africa. So that was an encouragement to the South African Jewish paper to put a copy of this death notice into their paper. Another South Africa record on there. And then as we go a little bit further down, the penultimate one, that is Isaac Jacobs. And I've always said a colonist, did he go of his own volition or was he sent? And I have to apologize to the Jacobs family because he was an extremely upstanding citizen. And you can see he had, a great obituary, his photo in the press. So my apologies on going to the Jacobs family for this very upstanding citizen. And the answer is, don't just use one source, use lots of sources. Otherwise, you're going to find the wrong information or incomplete information going into your one-name study. Other things you find in the Jewish Chronicle tend to be things like wills for very well-known communal figures. So the Klingenstein family, they later became the K family. What a surprise. They shortened their surname. But if they're a Klingenstein, they're related to me. Anyway, his will was in the Jewish Chronicle. We also have the Jewish Historical Society of England. And every year, for as long as they've been going, they publish their transactions. So extended historical essays and papers. You can subscribe to them and get access to their back catalogue from their website, or you can read them in the library of the Jewish Genealogical Society. We had, until 2015, a book called the Jewish Yearbook. It was published every year, really helpful, extremely useful. The section at the back that I used to call Who's Jew, lots of biographies of Jewish celebrities, ranging right across the British Empire in those times, all sorts of information. It has now ceased publication, rather sadly. But the first one also had a section on those who bore arms, so Jewish members of parliament, celebrities, also lots of extended essays, plus information about different communities up and down the length of the UK, plus Jewish communities abroad. So you could compare one year to another, and you'd be comparing apples and apples rather than apples with pears. Let's talk about those who fell serving for the crown in World War I and World War II. Two books to consider here. The British Jury Book of Honour for World War I, a great doorstep of a volume without an index, I should say. And then We Will Remember Them, now on its second edition for World War II. Not to worry if you can't access either or both of those, because those kind people at Forces War Records, and I think possibly at MyHeritage too now, have also indexed and made both searchable. So you don't just have to see the book, you can find other places to access the same information. Of course, Jewish family members will also be featured in the Gazette, and I know we all love to search the Gazette to look at all the information in there about our family members. You can also find changes of name by deed poll, naturalizations, bankruptcies. If you don't want to know, don't look. All sorts of notices. So here's a couple of examples from my family, from the Gazette. The husband in the pair, Mark Schubach, passed in 1901, and his executors were William Klingenstein, him of the will we saw earlier, and Isaac William Schubach. They were cigar importers. And by the time Mrs. Schubach passed away some years later, he was Isaac William Schubach had become William Sherbrooke. I should say their cousin, William Behr, B-E-H-R, became, oh, I'm lying, Samuel Behr became Samuel Baird, much more anglicised. So we have to deal with constantly changing names because people wanted to fit in at different times. So they would anglicise surnames. And lo and behold, that Isaac William Schubach, he was a cigar broker, and he worked at 30 St Mary Axe, which is the home today of the Gherkin. And I always say I am going to go and claim the top 4 floors as mine. He wasn't that close a relative, only 4 floors. Okay, another Jewish site to look at is the Hidden Treasures site. And this is growing. It pulls together records and information from more than 50 different sites across the UK, and it tells you what they've got and where, lots of photos. Definitely worth having a look at this website. If you're researching in Scotland, you need to go to the Scottish Jewish Archives Centre. They have their own website and lots of records. There's also been a good study done on the Scottish Jewish community, but you can read up on their website about that. If you're looking on Family Search for specifically Jewish records, starting with the Isabel Mordy collection, which is at the Society of Genealogists, Todd Knowles, one of the Deputy Chief Genealogical Officers at Family Search, has created the Knowles collection. It started off just being UK records, but because Jewish families tend to migrate and be in a different location perhaps in every generation or two, it very quickly became much wider than the British Isles and is quite a worldwide sort of a study too. So would advise looking at the Knowles collection. Let's move continents now and go to the United States. So the New York Public Library has a collection of Yiska books. Yiska books are memorial books that were created by survivors of the Holocaust to commemorate their former towns and cities, wherever they were around the world, mostly across Europe. And they've published their Yiska books online, and there are a lot of translations being made of Yiska books too, because mostly they were written in Hebrew or in Yiddish. So a lot have been translated into English or from German or from Polish or whichever other language. Other places to research, the Center for Jewish History in New York, we'll come on to them. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, they've got a copy of the Arolsen collection there as well. A small website called Jewish Data, which has a collection of information that you don't have anywhere else. And then the Museum of Family History, which is a virtual museum. It doesn't actually exist other than in cyberspace. And in case you thought it had, your family's name was never changed at Ellis Island. Let's talk now about the IAJGS, the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies. So we're a pretty worldwide bunch, and there are Jewish genealogical societies that we are closely connected with in all of these different locations around the world. So if you need a contact somewhere to research Jewish records somewhere that isn't in the UK, we probably know someone who can help. Another website to look at for Jewish genealogy sources is Genealogy Indexer. The inventor of this, a chap called Logan Kleinwax, takes a lot of old directories, address books, Yiska books, lists, military lists, communal histories, and has scanned them and made them searchable online. He's a bit of an IT wizard, and you can subscribe to his Twitter feed, and then you'll get to know all the new things that he adds constantly. He's also the guy who has helped a lot of the German genealogy websites with their scanning projects for lots of the German address books. Those who are interested in German address books may care to note. Another website to look at is Steve Morse's One Step website. It does what it says on the tin. It's worth having a look at. There's also information on using foreign alphabets, translating from Cyrillic/Russian into and Hebrew into English alphabets, good ways of searching, a whole load of different people searching databases in the United States, and definitely a good place to look at things like Soundex, mostly because he helped create it. Avatenu. It literally means our fathers. That's the translation of the Hebrew word. And Avatenu is the name of the Jewish genealogy journal, the worldwide journal. It's been going since 1985. It's published 4 times a year. JGSGB and SOG have copies in their library. You can also subscribe to the electronic version, which has only got the first 27 years on the go or accessible, but it's got all sorts of useful information in it. And we'll come back to Avatenu very shortly. One important thing that you have on Avatenu is what's called the Consolidated Jewish Surname Index. That is basically a way to search a database by Soundex that will signpost you to 42 different databases of where you can go to potentially find more information about the particular surname that you're looking up in there. And it's designed and been developed using one of the two Jewish Soundex systems called the Mokotov Soundex. So you can read more about Soundex either on Steve Morse's website or on the Avatenu website or on Jewish Gen. So a bit more information about them. So you get a choice of Soundexes to use. I'd try both. You can find different things. So here's an example from my friend Sue Pfeiffer's talk that she gave. She's looking for Pfeiffers from a place in Poland. And when she puts her name in, for the Soundex, you get lots of different varieties of the name. So what you need to do, because people will have written things down, spelling wasn't set for so many years. So, you know, all of these are varieties of Pfeiffer, and that might all be her family. I've got another example. In the Arelson archive, they have located 849 different spellings of the surname Abramovich. So we always tell people researching Jewish family history, do not get hung up about the spelling. Go with the Soundex version instead. I mentioned the Centre for Jewish History just earlier. They have got 6 different institutions in the one place, and they all share a common centrally held library. Definitely a good place to go. You don't want to go to New York and go shopping. You want to go researching like me. The library is called the Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute. They have lots of their resources online as well. They also have lots of free fact sheets on their website, including clues to how to research Jewish family history in lots of different places, lots of aspects of United States research, but also country-based as well. So by census, by topic for Jewish genealogy in the US and states. There's also a book that you can find and search the index online for first American Jewish families. And there's an American Jewish yearbook. I think it's probably a bit like the Jewish yearbook, but on steroids. So there's a lot more of it to look at. And the United States government website wants you to be able to trace information about people. So there's a link that will be in your handout, and it talks about how you can find everything about a person. So everything you want to know about Mr. or Ms. X. Let's move country now and go to Israel. There is the National Library of Israel, which hosts the Central Archives for the History of the Jewish People. It's based in Jerusalem, and they have on their website their catalogues online at the moment. The plan is to put a lot more records online, but they have records for places that no longer exist. They've taken in loads of records everywhere from Algeria to Yugoslavia and in between. It's a place you can't ask them for help and they'll do your research for you. It's a you have to go there kind of a place. And you need to know your way around, obviously, the overseas language varieties of the research that you need to do. But definitely worth a quick visit once in a while if you're there. Then there is the Museum of the Jewish Diaspora or of the Jewish People, called Anu Museum in Israel. It used to be called Bet Hatfutzot. They have all sorts of Jewish community profiles there, and definitely worth a look. Their photo exhibition and holdings are extensive. Now, you may be gathering that in Jewish genealogy, names are a big thing. Well, only in Israel, the Bar Ilan University in Haifa has a whole faculty dedicated to the study of naming in the Jewish tradition. And their emeritus professor is Professor Aaron Dembski, and he is now on volume number 5 of his studies of Jewish onomastics or naming. So yeah, only in Israel. There we go. Now let's talk about Ashkenazi and Sephardi, and also Mizrahi we'll add in as well. So Ashkenazi Jews are the ones from Central and Eastern Europe, and Ashkenaz is the Hebrew word for Germany, but Sephardi is Spain, Portugal, Italy, and the East, and Sepharad, the Hebrew word for Spain. Now, both traditions have different naming practices or conventions. Ashkenazi families won't name after living relatives, but Sephardi ones do. There are differences in and significant differences between family names and origins. And Mizrahi Jews are the ones that come from Egypt and North Africa. Let's talk a bit more about surnames. Let's talk about Ashkenazi surnames quite specifically. We have Napoleon to thank for that. He passed laws governing the surname adoption for Jews starting from about 1808. That was because he wanted to know who all these people were that he governed. So he wanted to know how he could persecute them and how to get them into military service. So we know, for example, that there were 32 different kinds of surname noted in Baden in southwest Germany. And we also know that surnames were adopted at different times and in different places. So the study of surnames, big thing in Jewish genealogy. In fact, study of first names as well, but that's a whole different issue for today. So how did a surname get adopted? There was a local law. They compiled lists. They reviewed revision lists. They submitted names to the equivalent of the Gazette. In Germany, there were publications in the Amtsblatt, the official journal. So if you're like me, you're researching your German Jewish ancestors, you need to look at things called surname adoption lists. And only then, when you've reached the surname adoption list, can you correlate what was the name after surname adoption, what's the name before surname adoption, and then you can go backwards to look at older records. So there are a couple of places, both in the handout, about surname adoption lists. So you'll be able to see them. And there are examples, because nothing's ever logical, of one German family where each of 4 sons adopted a different last name. Yeah, just to confuse you, right? Ho hum. We have a book. We have a large reference volume. Lars Menck is a Berlin-based postman, and his life's work was producing this dictionary. He won't go anywhere to public speak because he can't reach somewhere on his bicycle. We tried to get him to speak in Paris, but that was too far on his bicycle from Berlin, so he said no. And the front of this volume is a really detailed essay on surname adoption in Germany and German-speaking lands. And then after that, it's an encyclopedic dictionary of all German Jewish surnames. For Sephardic resources, you need to look at completely different reference sources. You can get Lars Menck's dictionary and this Sephardi reference volume and all the other big volumes I'm about to show you in a minute. You can buy copies through Avatenu. So Sephardic naming works differently. Spelling works differently. Sephardic spelling tends to be Spanish in origin, Arabic perhaps, definitely as you get as far as Mizrahi, whereas there's lots of more guttural sounds in Ashkenazi Yiddish. Sephardi names, there's a reference volume by guess who? Aaron Dembski, that professor, yeah. If you're looking for Sephardi naming, they have a good reference volume for that. If you go on holiday to Mallorca, there are a number of typically Mallorquin Jewish family names where those families were Majorcan Jewish families, and a lot of those families or people who bear those names are now going back from Catholicism, because remember, Spain persecuted the Jews, and there were forced conversions and all sorts of things. So you can read more about that if you're interested. And then we get to the legend, who is Dr. Alexander Beider. He is a Russian, he's Russian from Moscow by birth. He now lives in Paris, and he is the Ashkenazi, not just the Ashkenazi, his most recent volume is about the Maghreb, so Mizrahi names, but he is Mr. Jewish surname, essentially. So this is his Ashkenazi given names book, Ashkenazi structure of given names. All these are available through Avatenu. More books from Avatenu: Bulgarian, Sephardic, personal names, Russian Jewish first names. Here we go, Dr. Beider's volumes. Russian Empire, Galicia, that's not a bit of Spain, that's sort of Romania, Ukraine. Poland, the new volume, that's the Maghreb, North Africa, and southern Spain. We have a source book that gives you clues and ideas of where you can go to research family names. Slightly dated now, but it's when you used to have to actually go to libraries to find and research things. So lots of differences in naming patterns. I won't go into details now. There's lots of sources online. These are in your handouts. Differences by geography. So kinds of surname. So patronymics based on your father's name, matronymics based on your mother's name, based on geography, occupations, colours, religions. My name, Rosenberg, Mountain of Roses, Finkelstein, Glittering Stone. We have a model for one name studies. The late Professor Dr. Esterson wrote two articles in the same volume of Avatenu talking about how to research for a Jewish one name study. And these are where he says to research. And there are quite a few Jewish one name studies. These were just the first few that I managed to think about. My one name study is NEUGARTEN. There are probably lots more, and I could do several other one name studies out of these names. The ones on the right are all the ones in my tree, but there are probably lots, and anybody whose name isn't shown on here, apologies. I put this together quite quickly. And yes, there's a book all about people called Rosenberg who were changing their name, because Rosenberg tends to be an acquired name that people change their name to. Anyway, that's my interest as a Rosenberg. We tend, as Jewish genealogists, to do our DNA. Our aim is really to connect with other family members, because our families have generally been fractured by the incidents of the Holocaust. So we do that, and a couple of people to recommend to you. Lara Diamond. Lara publishes the Lara's Genealogy blog, and Israel Pickholtz, and he's got a one name study of Pickholtz. He's a guild member as well. His book is about endogamy, because Jewish families are endogamous. We tend to marry amongst our own. And Lara gave me a lovely example of this record for her Fuchs family from Maramosh in Ukraine. So this is when Shlomo Fuchs married Chaya. And what do we know? We know that he was called Fuchs, she was called Fuchs. Her father's name was Fuchs, her mother's name was Fuchsova. So they were all Fuchses on both sides of the family. They may or may not have been closely related to one another before they got married. But there you go. That's Laura's tale of the foxes. I have a couple of other cases just to share with you, because researching Eastern European Jewish families can be quite complicated. I did some research a few years ago to help my friend Alexandra Foreman, and looking at UK records. Her ancestor was written on the marriage certificate as Firmonster, or as Fulmonsky, Fromonsky, Firminsky, Furminsky, and Firmin. All UK documents, same family, different varieties. Here we have a page from FreeBMD. So Amelia Samuels got married to the Chaplonsky. That family is Lawrence Harris's family, and he's a guild member too, because that's his family study. We're not sure exactly who it was, because he was enumerated in lots of different ways. Chapkovsky, Shapusky, Kivkovsky. He was also known as Lane or Wolf or Goldstein as a surname, as an alternate. And he changed his first name too. So lots of different varieties of the same name. Who did Melanie? Who was Melanie? Was she Grundaum, Grunbaum, Grundaum? Was she Merrill? We don't know. As I say, all these taken from FreeBMD, and they're for real. And then Sydney, Bilski or Dennis married Anne or Annie Dennis or Katz or Lipsky. Now the question is, who was Mrs. Israel Nevakovich? And I showed this slide in another talk I gave into a synagogue. And a lady a couple of rows back said, "That's my auntie." So she's probably not in the background today. But yeah, these are real examples. Okay. Another one. Rubin, Landman or Landsman. Who did he marry? Rachel Barron, Baron. Okay. Then another example, I was helping somebody look for their Rubin, Hetty Rubin. Got them in 1911. Didn't find them any further. I've still been looking, but I found another one who was Hetty, also known as Harry, that Find My Past said was a man, that I'm not convinced was a man at all. But there we go. Now we have another example of this other Hetty Rubin, or Rubin, who married Jacob Sklanovsky. So yeah, a bit confusing. Was there one or two marriages here? And it definitely looks like there might have been two, or was it a double wedding? But then I found the answer. In the Gazette, it says that he changed his name. So of course he's registered under both names on his marriage certificate. Now the picture of the man with the glass is because in a Jewish wedding or at a Jewish wedding, it is customary for the bridegroom to be given a glass to stamp on and to break. And that's part of Jewish marriage tradition. I won't go into more details. Now back to that picture of that marriage authorization I showed you right at the beginning. This was really the marriage of Abraham Chicken marrying Jane Pluck. You can't make this stuff up, right? I have a bit of a case study now of my own family, my one name study, and it starts about looking at this old photo that I was given. And my family came from Germany, from Nordrhein-Westphalia. That's the bit that's in red. Here's NRW, 2 archives. I'm looking at the bit on the right because my family lived all around Dortmund. We have our own cemetery in Dortmund, and everybody in here is related to me. My one name study is the same is this family. They're called NEUGARTEN. We have varieties, but I haven't registered them yet. We say NEUGARTEN, but the American bit of the family call them NEUGARTEN. The Israeli bit call them Nagan. Another American bit, call them NEUGART. The Australian bit, they're the ones that own and run wineries in Australia, call them NEUGARTEN. And the Polish part of the family, spell it NEUGARTEN, but pronounce it NEUGARTEN. And we're not sure yet if the Neugarts are related. They might be. We've got 12 genealogists researching the family. The photo is 2 Jeanettes and a Roberta. One of the Jeanettes is me. There are 940 descendants of our oldest ancestor. We get lots and lots of family names marrying Neugartens. This is our oldest photo, Hennerina Neugarten and her husband Jacob Ironstone. All the family lived in the area around Dortmund. Amazing things you can do with maps. As you can see, Dortmund is almost covered up by little blue tags on this. We're in 23 countries around the world and 19 US states. We find lots of articles in German Jewish newspapers, in old German Jewish newspapers that are less accessible. The previous slide was an American German Jewish newspaper. We have lots of different religions, priests, rabbis, loads of my Facebook friends. I check for new relatives all over the place. We're still working to reunite people. There's lots of work in progress. And the reason I do it is for my great grandma, who I am named for. This is her. So she was born in Nordrhein-Westphalia and she is buried in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And this is where she lived in Herdecke in Westphalia. So that is the end of my talk for now. I'm happy to take some questions. The one address you're going to need is on the bottom of this slide. It's the roundtoit genealogy .wordpress.com website. And when we stop talking, I will press a button and the handout will miraculously appear and you will be able to download it from the website. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jeanette, and I'm glad that you told us how to pronounce your study name, because I looked at it and I thought, I'm not even going there. Amazing, Jeanette. Thank you so much. I learned quite a lot, and I've had lots of questions about your handout. So I know that it's on the bottom of this slide, and
Yep.
I will put the link on the same page the recording will be, so that you'll be
Okay.
able to watch it again, and then you'll be able to go and find the handout. I've had a couple of comments. First, from Paul House, who says, absolutely Tour de France, Jeanette. I look forward to your extensive source list. Thank you. Can you give us a quick tutorial on dates, please?
On dates, as in dates for surname adoption or dates for when surnames were adopted and where? I mean, in terms of dates, in terms of German genealogy, I have to use the French Revolutionary calendar sometimes because some of the earlier records in Nordrhein-Westphalia, in Cologne, in the archive, use that calendar. So early records civil registration came in at different times in different places, surname adoptions, different times in different places. Yeah, Austro-Hungarian Empire, my husband is prompting me, was the 1870s? 1770s, right. Yeah, different countries, different rules.
Okay, Paul's just clarified a point. He also says Tour de Force, not France. So that was me. I'm being too far from the screen. That's what it is when you, I won't go into the details. So Paul says, why someone might have been recorded with different birth dates?
Yeah, possible, entirely so.
Just because I'm guessing if they're living in a country where there was conscription or there was lots of persecution, the idea was to perhaps give false information, perhaps.
Yes, definitely. And that's another of the reasons why families would have different surnames for different sons, because they'd say, no, I only have one, and it's this one, and then they'd not have to go and serve in the Tsar's army. Yeah.
I was asked one day last week why we do global studies, and I suggested to the person that they attend tonight's session. This is why studies are global, is because people scatter to the four winds of where they will be safe. And
Definitely.
and sometimes it's just a case of opportunities as opposed to looking for, but that's exactly why. And with those all those variants in and how you say names and how people think it's spelt, and of course, if you're illiterate, you don't know how your name is spelt, so you couldn't correct people. So this is a really good example of why people should be looking at the global element. And for those people that are perhaps um, not working on a one name study that is registered, is it's bite-sized chunks. You'll do a global study in the way you would eat an elephant, in bite-sized chunks. So a comment from John Reed, who says, how would I find the groom's parents' first Hebrew names for an 1887 marriage in Sandys Row Synagogue?
Post on the JGSGB Facebook page, and I would imagine people will fall over themselves to try and help you. JGSGB has got a visit to Sandys Row coming up. Is it the 24th, I think, of July, I believe? Join us and come with us. You could have a look for the marriage authorization, because that will have the father's name on it. There may be records in some of the London synagogue records that we can find, but I'd say post in our Facebook group and we'll try and help.
There's no other questions at the moment, but I have one. So
Yep.
at the very beginning, you talked about if the groom died, the bride would marry one of the brothers.
Yep.
When that occurred, was there a kind of a pecking order? So it was the
oldest one first. Provide that it was only the unmarried brothers that were on there, and it obviously had to be an unmarried brother. Yeah.
Okay. And if the
There's
brother
also,
had, sorry, I think, and if the brother, so if at the time of the marriage the brother was not married,
yeah,
and by the time the groom died, he was married, it just went to the next one who was unmarried.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Definitely. Yeah, it was optional. It wasn't a compulsion thing. I was going to say there's also lots of examples of, because we marry among our own, of lots of first cousin marriages. I have a cousin in Israel who, in fact, one of my dad's first cousins is a child of two first cousins, but that is not uncommon. But also there were other cousin marriages further up the tree. That happened quite a lot, particularly in small communities where the family married among their own. I guess it happened in some villages in the UK as well, to keep assets within a family.
Yeah, quite possibly. Although the cousins marrying cousins, so I think you'll find that in most rural communities, even if you've got British family. So, but I take your point that it's much easier, isn't it? If you marry amongst your own, then there's no surprises. You know exactly what will happen, and everything just keeps ticking along as
Yeah.
I suppose it should do. Okay, that's very interesting. John Lyles asked questions. In fact, he's asked two questions, I think. Let's have a quick read. So he said, I have a Benjamin Davidson in my study who was Jewish. I am told his records are in the Rothschild's archives. Doesn't the Boston, the next bit is, doesn't the Boston NEHGS organization have a Jewish archive?
Yes, there's lots of Jewish archives all over America. But yeah, the New England Historic Genealogical Society does have a Jewish part of it too. Yes, I've been there. I've researched at it, yes.
And the Rothschild Archives, is that New York?
I don't know. There are Rothschild archives in the UK as well. My suggestion is post in our Facebook group and somebody will answer the question.
I actually have a book about Jewish families of New York. I can't reach it because
Is it the one called Our Crowd?
might be. It's got my book has got a rather tatty cover with a green cover, which probably doesn't help you very much.
No.
I can't reach it because chaos will in, and we're recording this. But I'll have a look and see if I can find any references in it.
Okay.
And John says he was London. Okay, so he was in London. So
Now, the best person to ask is probably Doreen Berger, who's a former chairman of JGSGB. She is very knowledgeable about the Rothschild family. Post in our Facebook group and someone will signpost her to it, or she'll see it.
Okay. And my final question, Jeanette, are there people that aren't of the Jewish faith, members of the Jewish Genealogical Society of Great Britain?
Yes, loads. Because it's about people who are researching a Jewish ancestor, or in some cases, a spouse's Jewish ancestor.
Yeah.
You don't have to be Jewish to be a member of JGSGB. We're a secular charity from the UK. You know, we don't check to see if somebody's Jewish, not Jewish. It's about researching Jewish ancestors, tracing Jewish roots.
I was just wondering whether there was. John, I don't know whether you can see in the question and answers bit, or whether I've just got a special view because I'm special. But there is a link in there that Joy, thank you, Joy, has posted. If you can't see it, I will copy and paste it and send it to you in an email, and I will make sure that link is on the website when I upload the recording, and I put a link to Jeanette's site. Are there any more questions, people? Come on, this is the time of the day when I say, are there any more questions? And then 3 people say there's a question. Ah, okay, so it looks like this Benjamin Davidson's been problematic for oh yeah, so Annette, the handout is going to be on Jeanette's site. If you look at the screen, you'll see that the last link on there is roundtoitgenealogy.wordpress.com. That's where it will be shortly.
In a minute when I press a button.
That's great. So yeah, so you'll be able to access the handout there. And also, as I said, the link will be available on the Guild website with the recording, which is likely to go up over the weekend. Maybe if I haven't got too much fiddling to do at the very beginning, it won't be a problem. But if I need a bit more fiddling, I've got a busy week, so I may well get it done by the weekend. So on that note, it looks like we are now finished. Jeanette, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Evening. It's been great. You're always a really great speaker, so expect an email from me. I'm looking at next year. And there's no peace for the wicked, apparently. So you've been great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to end this evening. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. The next webinar is going to be from Paul Featherson, who was going to be talking about his Featherson study. And this is our opportunity for people to highlight their one name studies and share with guild members and others how they do their study and perhaps how they ended up doing a study. If you want to perhaps participate in and showcase your study, please just drop me an email. I have approached a number of people, but I really want people to come to me and say, I can do this. And you know, you'll be, if you need help with the presentation and so forth, we can sort that out. So if you are wanting to do that, that would be fantastic. And you can just email webinars with an S on the end at one-name.org. So thank you so much, people. It's been lovely to hear from you, Jeanette, and thank you so much to you and to Mark for his input and for sharing you with him or with us this evening. And I will see you all next time on the 17th of August when Paul will be talking about the Featherstone study. Thanks so much. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.